Y, so 36 amino acids, 3 distinct endogenous ligands, and I think they are here PYY and PY, so the true neuropeptide Y, and PP, and I don't what means PP. Anyway, so there are 3 with distinct affinity, potency for Y1, Y2, Y4, Y5, and Y6 receptors. So Y1, Y2, Y4, 5, and 6. It is a little bit weird, no? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So the reason why we don't have 3, which should be logic, no? This is because the Y3 was a receptor that was pharmacologically identified, and in fact could not have been the correspondence with genomic studies. So no clone of this receptor. So they subsequently named other receptors, and Y3 could correspond to another one. So at the end we have Y1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And Y6 has been isolated, but it looks like it is not really effective, efficacious. We don't know. Anyway, this slide also presents selective agonist. We don't have selective agonist. We have some peptides acting like they can, and usually you have to inject them directly in the brain. Selective antagonist. We have some antagonists that indeed could be more selective for Y1, but they are still neuropeptides. So you have to inject them inside the brain. So radioligands, radio-labeled ligand, here this is difficult because still you have to base your data and studies with modified peptides. So this is not easy. And be aware that all of them are coupled to G proteins. So on the next slide, I present again the distribution of CRF, the peptide, and the distribution of the 2 receptors for CRF. I mean 2, in fact we can play to 3 or something like that, but the 2 main receptors, which are CRF1 and CRF2. So I won't go back on the distribution of CRF, and I will directly switch to the distribution of the receptors. In pink, you have CRF1, and in blue, CRF2. As you can see, the distribution between the 2 is completely different. CRF1 being more represented or expressed in the brain compared to CRF2. Especially in the cortex, you can see that it is quite well represented. Thalamus, pituitary gland, cerebellum, olfactive tubercle, etc., etc. Then you have some specific region with CRF2, including the olfactive tubercle, the lateral septum, the nucleus of the tractus of the solitary, sorry, tractus, no, I won't have it, NTS, nucleus of the solitary tract, anyway. And after that, some shared region like hippocampus, colliculus, periaqueducal gray, and septum or BNST or whatever. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Now, if you look at the cerebellum or the olfactive bulb, you will have a strong presence of CRF1, but if you look at the distribution of CRF above, you have nothing. So this is kind of mismatch in the way that we don't have the neurotransmitter, but we have receptors. Sometimes we have the neurotransmitter, but we don't have the receptor. So don't go so far to explain this mismatch. Maybe it is technical. So we did not see the fibers and we saw the presence of the receptor, but with the tools, the engineering tools today, I think this is difficult to really have mismatches. Then, if it is not mismatch, maybe this is a reality of a mismatch, but maybe there are other neurotransmitters acting on CRF1 and CRF2. So beyond CRF, maybe you have other neuropeptides of the same family. Maybe they have a motif sequence in the peptide acting on CRF1 and CRF2. And this is a case of urocortin. And I think there are 5 or 6 neuropeptides. So maybe some of these peptides are more represented in the olfactive bulb and the cerebellum. So the specific effect and transduction systems. In general, for classical neurotransmitters, you have the classical 7 transmembrane receptors coupled to G proteins and ionotropic receptors, not for catecholamines, but for glutamate, GABA, acetylcholine, and serotonin. For neuropeptides, as far as I know, we have 7 transmembrane receptors coupled to G proteins in most cases, but we have also perhaps a sodium channel one transmembrane segment, maybe tyrosine activity.